A first-class cabin, 35,000 feet in the air, becomes the stage for an unforgivable act. A senior flight attendant, fueled by a long-simmering bitterness, unleashes her fury on a passenger. The passenger is a woman, she is black, and she is heavily pregnant. The sharp, cracking sound of a slap echoes through the hushed cabin, a sound of pure contempt. But what this flight attendant doesn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, is that the gentle, unassuming woman she just assaulted is married to the one man who holds her entire world in his hands. This isn't just a story about an unruly employee. It's about the devastating, life-altering karma that comes for you when you abuse your power, unaware that you've just crossed the silent king of the empire. The air in the first-class cabin of Aura Airlines Flight 710 from JFK to London Heathrow was a carefully curated symphony of privilege. It smelled of warmed nuts, expensive leather, and the faint floral notes of complimentary champagne. For Dr. Aaliyah Williams, 8 months pregnant and bone-weary from a whirlwind week of presenting her latest research in pediatric cardiology, Seat 2B was supposed to be a sanctuary, a 7-hour bubble of tranquility before the final nesting rush in her London home. She settled her body into the plush, cream-colored pod, a feat that required careful negotiation with her prominent baby bump. She smiled softly, placing a protective hand over her belly as her daughter gave a gentle kick, a little hello from within. Aaliyah was a woman who radiated a quiet confidence. Her resume was a litany of Ivy League degrees and life-saving surgical innovations. But her demeanor was warm, her eyes kind. She wore a simple but elegant cashmere travel set, her hair braided intricately, a style that was both beautiful and practical for a long-haul flight. The first hint of dissonance in this orchestrated harmony came in the form of a flight attendant named Brenda Jenkins. Brenda was a woman etched with the fine lines of discontent. She had been flying for over 25 years, and her crisp uniform and perfectly coiffed blonde hair couldn't hide the permanent look of disappointment in her eyes. She saw the first-class cabin not as a space of service, but as her personal fiefdom. The passengers were merely temporary guests, and some, in her estimation, were less deserving of their seat than others. Brenda's eyes scanned the manifest on her tablet and then flickered towards Aaliyah. A micro-expression, a barely perceptible tightening of her lips, crossed her face. She glided over, her smile as thin and brittle as a wafer. "Can I see your boarding pass, ma'am?" she asked. Her tone wasn't a question. It was a challenge. Aaliyah, who had just tucked her bag away, looked up. "Of course." She retrieved the pass from her travel wallet and handed it over. Brenda made a show of examining it, her eyes darting from the name, Dr. Aaliyah Williams, to Aaliyah's face, and then pointedly down to her pregnant belly. "Williams. Right, seat 2B, just making sure everyone is in their correct assigned seat." The implication was clear, hanging in the recycled air between them. "You don't look like you belong here." It was a familiar sting, 1,000 tiny cuts Aaliyah had learned to endure throughout her life and career. She simply nodded, offering a polite but firm smile. "I'm quite sure. It's the seat I paid for." Brenda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course it is." She turned to the white businessman in seat 2A, a Mr. Abernathy, and her entire demeanor transformed. "Mr. Abernathy, welcome back. The usual Macallan 18 before takeoff?" Her voice was honeyed, dripping with the deference she reserved for those she deemed worthy. Aaliyah watched the exchange, a familiar weariness settling over her. This was going to be a long flight. As the passengers settled, Brenda continued her targeted campaign of neglect. While Mr. Abernathy was offered a hot towel, a pre-departure drink, and a selection of newspapers, Aaliyah was seemingly invisible. She had to press the call button twice just to request a bottle of water. When Brenda finally arrived, she placed it on the tray table without a word, her movements clipped and resentful. "Could I also trouble you for a pillow to support my back?" Aaliyah asked, her voice even and polite. "The one provided is a bit thin." Brenda sighed, a theatrical exhalation of manufactured burden. "We have a limited supply of comfort items, ma'am. They are for all the passengers." "I understand," Aaliyah replied patiently. "I'm just asking for one. Given my condition, a little extra support would be greatly appreciated." "I'll see what I can do," Brenda said, her tone suggesting she would be undertaking a heroic quest rather than fetching a pillow from a nearby cupboard. She disappeared for 10 minutes, busying herself with other passengers, before finally returning with a pillow identical to the one Aaliyah already had. She tossed it onto the empty seat beside Aaliyah. "This is all we have." The passive aggression was as thick as the clouds they were preparing to ascend through. Aaliyah simply took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm for the baby. She was a doctor. She understood stress. She would not let this woman's bitterness penetrate her peace. She would close her eyes, listen to a podcast, and focus on the little life fluttering inside her. But as the plane began its powerful taxi toward the runway, she had a sinking feeling that this journey was about to become far more turbulent than anything the weather could possibly conjure. The ascent was smooth, and the aircraft soon settled at its cruising altitude, a silver dart piercing through the deep, star-dusted blue of the upper atmosphere. Below, the Atlantic was a vast, dark canvas. Inside, the cabin lights were dimmed to a soft glow, creating an illusion of peace that was, for Aaliyah, becoming increasingly fragile. The meal service began. Brenda orchestrated the process with the precision of a drill sergeant, her voice once again warming for her preferred passengers. When she reached Aaliyah's seat, the chill returned. "Your choice is the seared salmon or the filet mignon," she stated, not bothering to present the menu. "I pre-ordered the vegetarian pasta, actually," Aaliyah said gently. "It should be noted in my booking." She had been careful to do so, her pregnancy making her sensitive to certain foods. Brenda tapped impatiently at her tablet. "I don't see a special meal request here." She held the screen out for a brief, accusatory moment. "It says here you have no preference." Aaliyah was certain she had made the request. She had the confirmation email saved on her phone. But she didn't want a confrontation. "That's strange. I'm quite sure I did." "Well, in that case, is it possible to just get a simple salad? Or perhaps some bread and cheese?" "I can't eat the salmon or the steak." Brenda's face hardened. "Ma'am, the meals are pre-catered. We don't just have random ingredients to make custom salads. This is an airline, not a restaurant. You can have what's offered, or you can wait for the pre-landing snack in 5 hours." The dismissive, condescending tone finally broke through Aaliyah's practiced calm. "I am a first-class passenger with a clear medical need," she said, her voice low but firm, ensuring only Brenda could hear. "I am 8 months pregnant. A little flexibility and basic customer service should not be too much to ask. I am not asking for a custom salad. I am asking for a simple accommodation." This assertion of her rights was, in Brenda's eyes, an act of rebellion. Brenda saw Aaliyah not as a paying customer with a valid request, but as an uppity woman who needed to be put in her place. "Your condition doesn't entitle you to special treatment that wasn't arranged beforehand," Brenda hissed, leaning in closer. "If you were so concerned, you should have been more responsible and double-checked your booking." The insult was sharp, personal. It questioned her competence, her responsibility as a mother-to-be. Aaliyah felt a flush of anger, hot and swift. "My booking was correct. Perhaps the error is in your system or in your attitude." A few nearby passengers started to notice the tense exchange. A young man in seat 3A, a tech entrepreneur named Cody Evans, subtly angled his phone, a habit he'd developed for documenting everything from interesting cloud formations to, occasionally, human drama. A younger flight attendant, Jessica, noticed the escalating tension and hurried over. "Is there a problem, Brenda?" "No problem at all," Brenda said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she glared at Aaliyah. "The passenger is just having some difficulty understanding our catering policies." Jessica offered Aaliyah a sympathetic look. "Ma'am, let me see what I can find for you. I think we have some of the crew's vegetarian wraps. They're quite good. Would you like one?" Aaliyah's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you. That would be wonderful." Brenda shot Jessica a look that could curdle milk. "You will do no such thing. Crew meals are for the crew. We do not break policy for passengers who can't plan ahead." She turned back to Aaliyah. "You heard me. The filet or the salmon?" It was no longer about food. It was a raw power play. Brenda was marking her territory, and she was using Aaliyah as the example. Humiliating her was the point. "I will not be eating either," Aaliyah said, her voice now cold with resolve. "And I will be filing a formal complaint about your conduct as soon as we land." The word complaint was the spark that lit the fuse. For Brenda, who prided herself on an unblemished record, a record maintained by intimidating anyone who might dare to complain. This was the ultimate insult. It was a threat to her authority, to her very identity within the metallic confines of the fuselage. A complaint? Brenda laughed, a short, ugly bark. Don't you threaten me. I know your type. You come in here thinking your ticket buys you the right to treat us like servants. You think you can just demand whatever you want. I have demanded nothing, Aaliyah countered, her voice rising slightly despite her best efforts. I have requested basic decency. I have requested a meal I can safely eat. You are the one creating the scene. Oh, I'm creating the scene. Brenda's voice climbed in pitch, her face contorting with rage. You're the one causing a disruption. Aaliyah decided she was done. She wouldn't engage any further. She needed to remove herself from the situation. She put her hand on the armrest to push herself up, intending to go to the lavatory and collect herself. I'm done with this conversation, she said, her back to Brenda as she began to stand. Brenda saw this as an act of dismissal, the final effrontery. She moved to block Aaliyah's path. We are not done. You don't walk away from me. Get out of my way, Aaliyah said, her heart now pounding with a mixture of anger and alarm. You will sit down and you will be quiet, Brenda snarled, her face inches from Aaliyah's. And then, in a shocking, irrevocable moment that seemed to warp time, Brenda Jenkins raised her hand. The slap wasn't just a sound. It was a physical event that silenced the cabin. The crack of Brenda's palm against Aaliyah's cheek was sharp, ugly, and absolute. It echoed louder than any engine hum or cabin announcement. For a split second, there was a collective intake of breath from the few passengers who witnessed it, a unified gasp of disbelief. Aaliyah stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek, not just from the sting, but from the sheer, unadulterated shock. Her mind, usually so quick and analytical, went blank. The world narrowed to the throbbing heat on her skin, in the image of Brenda's face, twisted in a mask of triumphant rage. Her other hand instinctively flew to her belly, a primal protective gesture. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the shock. Not for herself, but for her baby. Cody Evans, the young man in 3A, didn't flinch. His thumb was already on the record button. He had caught the entire exchange, the verbal escalation, Aaliyah trying to leave, and the final violent act. The lens of his smartphone was an unblinking, impartial eye, capturing Brenda's contorted face and Aaliyah's stunned horror. Brenda herself seemed surprised by her own action. Her hand dropped to her side as if it had been burned. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a doubling down of her self-righteous fury. She had crossed a line and knew it, but her pride wouldn't let her retreat. She had to frame this as a justifiable act. Unruly passenger! Brenda shouted, her voice shrill, trying to seize control of the narrative. She assaulted me. She pushed me. It was a blatant, desperate lie. Mr. Abernathy in 2A, who had been watching with detached amusement until the slap, now looked appalled. She did no such thing. You blocked her path and you struck her. Jessica, the younger flight attendant, rushed forward, her face pale with horror. Brenda, what did you do? She gently guided Aaliyah back into her seat. Dr. Williams, are you okay? Please sit down. Aaliyah allowed herself to be guided, her legs suddenly weak. Tears welled in her eyes, hot tears of humiliation, rage, and a terrifying vulnerability. She was a doctor, a leader in her field, a woman of intellect and composure, and she had just been physically assaulted by a flight attendant over a vegetarian meal. The absurdity of it was almost as painful as the sting on her cheek. Call the captain, Aaliyah said, her voice trembling but regaining its steel. Right now, and I need a medic to meet us upon landing. I am pregnant, and I have just been assaulted. I need to be checked. Brenda, seeing her narrative crumbling, went on the offensive. She's lying. She's trying to get a free flight. She was aggressive from the moment she boarded. But her words rang hollow. The evidence was on Aaliyah's face, a faint red mark already beginning to bloom on her dark skin. The evidence was in the shocked faces of the surrounding passengers. Jessica spoke into the cabin intercom, her voice shaking. Purser to the flight deck, urgent. Purser to the flight deck. The head purser, a stern-looking man named Jeffrey, arrived within seconds. He took in the scene. Brenda, flushed and defensive. Aaliyah, composed but with tears streaming down her face, one hand on her cheek, the other on her belly, and the silent, watching passengers. "What is going on here?" Jeffrey demanded. "This passenger assaulted me," Brenda insisted, pointing a trembling finger at Aaliyah. "She did not," Cody Evans said loudly from his seat, holding up his phone. "And I have the entire thing on video. You verbally abused her, you blocked her, and you slapped her, unprovoked." The word video changed everything. The color drained from Brenda's face. The lie died on her lips, replaced by the cold, metallic taste of fear. In the 21st century, there was no hiding place. A digital ghost of her actions was already in existence, ready to be summoned, shared, and judged by millions. Jeffrey's professional mask was absolute. He turned to Brenda. "Go to the galley, now. Do not speak to another passenger." He then knelt by Aaliyah's seat, his voice low and serious. "Ma'am, on behalf of Aura Airlines, I am profoundly sorry. Are you hurt? Do you need medical assistance?" "I need to be sure my baby is okay," Aaliyah whispered, the adrenaline beginning to recede, leaving a deep, aching dread in its place. "I felt a sharp pain when it happened." The purser's face tightened. This had escalated from a customer service disaster to a potentially catastrophic liability. "We will have a priority medical team waiting for you at the gate in Heathrow. I will inform the captain immediately. We will divert if necessary." No diversion," Aaliyah said, her doctor's mind kicking in. "I don't think it's that serious, but I need to be checked. I need to make a phone call as soon as we land." Jeffrey nodded. "Of course. Anything you need." For the remainder of the flight, Aaliyah was treated with an almost reverential care. Jessica brought her water, a warm blanket, and the vegetarian wrap she had offered earlier. Jeffrey checked on her every 15 minutes. Brenda was nowhere to be seen, sequestered in the back galley like a leper, but no amount of belated kindness could erase the humiliation or the fear. Aaliyah sat in the darkened cabin, the plane a projectile hurtling through the night, and felt utterly alone. She closed her eyes and thought of her husband, Nate. He was her rock, her partner, the calm eye in any storm. He was a man who solved problems. He was gentle with her, but in his world, the world of high-stakes business and corporate strategy, he was a force of nature. He would be furious. He would want to tear the world apart for her. She just needed to get on the ground. She just needed to hear his voice. Then, and only then, would the ground feel solid beneath her feet again. She didn't know it yet, but the phone call she was about to make would not just bring her comfort. It would unleash a storm of consequences so precise and so devastating that it would shake the very foundations of the airline that bore her toward him. The descent into London was shrouded in the city's typical gray morning mist. For the other passengers, it signaled the end of a journey. For Aaliyah, it felt like the beginning of an ordeal. Every small bump of turbulence sent a fresh spike of anxiety through her. The purser had assured her that everything was being handled, that the authorities and a medical team would be waiting, but the words were a thin balm on a deep wound. As the plane taxied to the gate at Terminal 5, Aaliyah could see the flashing lights of an ambulance and several official-looking vehicles on the tarmac. The seatbelt sign pinged off, but the purser's voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please remain seated for a few moments. Medical personnel will be boarding the aircraft to assist a passenger." Aaliyah's face burned with a fresh wave of humiliation. She had become a spectacle. She wanted nothing more than to disappear. The jet bridge connected with a dull thud. The aircraft door opened, and two paramedics, a woman from airport police, and a man in a tailored Aura Airlines suit stepped aboard. The man was the airline's head of UK operations, Robert Knight, his face a grim mask of corporate concern. Jeffrey the purser led them directly to Aaliyah's seat. "Dr. Williams," Robert Knight began, his voice low and urgent. "I am Robert Knight. On behalf of our entire company, I want to express my deepest, most sincere apologies for the incident. Our only priority right now is your health and the health of your baby." The paramedics were kind and efficient, asking gentle questions as they took her blood pressure. Aaliyah answered them clinically, her doctor self taking over. "Blood pressure is a little elevated. likely from the stress. I felt a mild cramping sensation after the assault, but it has since subsided. I need a fetal Doppler and likely an ultrasound to be sure. We'll take you straight to the Asprey Clinic right here in the terminal. It's fully equipped, the paramedic assured her. Meanwhile, the airport police officer was taking a preliminary statement. Brenda Jenkins was escorted off the plane by another officer, her face pale and stony, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Her 25-year career had ended somewhere over the Atlantic, and she was just beginning to understand the depth of her fall. Cody Evans approached the officer before disembarking. "I have the video," he said simply. "I'm sending it to my cloud storage right now. Here's my card. I will cooperate fully." He gave Aaliyah a supportive nod. "I'm so sorry that happened to you." "Thank you," Aaliyah said, her voice thick with emotion. His simple act of witness and support was a small light in the darkness. As the paramedics prepared to help her up, Aaliyah turned to Robert Knight. "I need my phone. I need to call my husband." Of course," he said, eager to be helpful. She was escorted off the plane and into a private electric cart, bypassing the bustle of the main terminal. As they drove through the quiet service corridors, she finally dialed Nate's number. He would be in his office in Canary Wharf by now, probably in the middle of a high-level meeting. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey, beautiful, you're on the ground. I was just tracking your flight. How was the trip?" Tears she hadn't even known were there began to fall. "Nate," she sobbed, the sound raw and broken. The warmth in his voice vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp edge of alarm. "Aaliyah, what is it? What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "The baby? I think the baby is okay. I'm with paramedics now," she said, trying to steady her breath. "Nate, something happened on the flight. A flight attendant. She hit me." Silence. On the other end of the line, in a glass-walled office overlooking the whole of London, Nathaniel Beaumont went completely still. The pen in his hand stopped moving. His eyes, usually filled with a thoughtful intelligence, became cold, hard chips of granite. "She what?" The question was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of a collapsing mountain. "We had an argument. It was nothing. It was so stupid over a meal, and she got so angry, and she slapped me." Aaliyah's voice broke again. "In front of everyone." Nate's knuckles were white as he gripped his phone. He swiveled his chair to face the window, his gaze fixed on the distant sky where his wife had just been violated. He asked a series of short, precise questions. "Are you hurt?" "I don't think so. My cheek stings. I'm going to the clinic now." "The baby?" "They're going to check. I think we're okay." "The employee's name?" Brenda Jenkins." "The flight number?" "Aura 710. He took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was transformed. The concerned husband was gone, replaced by the man who had built a global logistics and aviation empire from the ground up. It was the voice his board of directors knew well. It was calm, controlled, and utterly lethal. "Okay, honey, I'm on my way. I'm sending my personal security to meet you at the clinic. Don't talk to anyone else from the airline. Don't accept any apologies or offers. Just focus on you and our daughter. I will handle everything else. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "I love you. I'm 5 minutes away from being in the car. I will see you soon." "I love you too, Nate." He hung up. For a full 10 seconds, he didn't move. He just stared out the window. His company, Beaumont Holdings, was a sprawling conglomerate with interests in shipping, technology, and real estate. But his first love, his flagship enterprise, the company he had personally built with an obsessive focus on prestige and service, was the one that had just betrayed him. He pressed the intercom on his desk. "Lorraine, cancel my next 3 meetings. Get the jet ready for New York, and get me the CEO of Aura Airlines on a secure line in 2 minutes." His assistant's voice came back, confused. "Sir? The CEO of Aura Airlines? That's you." Nate's voice was ice. "Exactly. So get me my chief of operations, my head of legal, and my head of PR on a conference call. The subject is Aura Flight 710 in Lorraine. Find out everything there is to know about a flight attendant named Brenda Jenkins. I want to know where she went to high school. I want to know what she ate for breakfast. I want it all. Now." He stood up, his 6'3" frame radiating a barely contained fury. The people at Aura Airlines, from the baggage handlers to the board members, knew Nathaniel Beaumont as the visionary founder and majority shareholder, a demanding but fair leader who was largely hands-off in the day-to-day operations. They were about to meet the husband, and they were about to learn what happened when the soul of his company dared to harm the love of his life. While Aaliyah was being examined in the quiet, sterile efficiency of the Asprey Clinic, a corporate hurricane was forming over Canary Wharf. In the main boardroom of Beaumont Holdings, a sleek expanse of glass and steel on the 48th floor, Nate's executive team assembled with a speed born of fear and respect. There was David Chen, the COO, a logistical genius. There was Lorraine Finch, his chief legal officer, a woman so sharp she could have been carved from obsidian. And there was Michael Davies, his head of PR, a man who could spin a disaster into a minor inconvenience. They sat around the massive mahogany table, their faces grim. They knew from the tone of the summons that this was not a standard operational issue. Nate walked in, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He wasn't yelling. He was worse. He was perfectly, frighteningly calm. Aura Flight 710 from JFK landed an hour ago, he began, his voice flat. On that flight, a senior flight attendant named Brenda Jenkins physically assaulted a first-class passenger. The passenger is 8 months pregnant. The passenger is my wife. He let the words hang in the air. David Chen audibly gasped. Lorraine Finch's expression became one of cold fury. Michael Davies looked like he was about to be sick. Their boss, the reclusive, press-shy billionaire who fiercely guarded his family's privacy, had just had his world breached by his own company. Initial reports are being compiled now, Nate, David began, already typing furiously on his laptop. The head of UK Ops met her at the gate. The employee has been detained by airport police pending an investigation. Investigation? Nate repeated the word as if it were a foreign object. Lorraine, what is our immediate legal position? Lorraine was ready. Assault and battery is a criminal offense. We suspend the employee indefinitely, without pay, pending the outcome of the police investigation. From a civil standpoint, the liability is catastrophic. A pregnant woman, a documented pattern of verbal harassment confirmed by witnesses, and a physical assault. The settlement will be astronomical. There will be no settlement, Nate said coolly. They all stared at him. A settlement implies we are trying to buy our way out of a problem, Nate continued. We are going to excavate this problem. This is not about one employee. This is about a culture that allowed that employee to feel comfortable enough to commit that act. This is a cancer, and we are going to treat it with radiation. He began to pace, the silent predator in his own boardroom. First, Brenda Jenkins. I want her employment terminated by the end of the day. Cite gross misconduct. Let the union scream. We have a video. Lorraine, coordinate with the Crown Prosecution Service. Ensure they understand that Aura Airlines will provide any and all resources necessary to see Mrs. Jenkins prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We are not defending her. We are not hiding her. We are the primary witness against her. He turned to Michael Davies. PR, you are not to release a single statement until I approve it. No vague corporate apologies. When we speak, it will be with absolute clarity. This is not something we are looking into. This is something we are eradicating. Finally, he turned to David Chen. Operations, I want the personnel files of every flight crew member on that plane. I want a full audit of every single customer complaint filed against Brenda Jenkins for the last 10 years. I want to know who her supervisors were, who signed off on her performance reviews, and who ignored the warning signs that I guarantee are there. His gaze sharpened. And I want you to pull the records for Jessica, the junior flight attendant who tried to help my wife. Find out her career aspirations. Find out what she wants. A call came through on the conference phone. It was Robert Knight, the UK operations head, his voice strained. Mr. Beaumont, I'm here at the clinic. I have an update. Go ahead, Robert, Nate said, his voice dangerously even. Dr. Williams and the baby are both fine. The doctors have given them a clean bill of health, though they recommend rest. The police have taken her full statement. She's an incredible woman, poised, clear, composed. Nate closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. a wave of profound relief washing over him. The rage, however, remained. "And what of the video, Robert?" Nate asked. "The witness, a Mr. Cody Evans, has already sent it to the authorities, but, sir, he also sent it to a journalist friend at the BBC. It's online. It's already got 50,000 views in the last 20 minutes." Michael Davies swore under his breath. The hurricane had just made landfall. Nate was unfazed. "Good. Let the world see what happened. Let them see what we do about it." He ended the call and looked at his team. "New directives. Michael, you will draft a statement. It will come from me, personally. It will name Brenda Jenkins. It will state that she has been terminated and that we are actively assisting law enforcement in her prosecution. It will detail the assault on my wife, Dr. Aaliyah Williams, and it will announce the beginning of a full, root and branch review of our company's culture, training, and complaint resolution processes. We are not hiding. We are taking this head on." He looked at Lorraine. "Offer Mr. Cody Evans free first-class flights for life on any Aura route, and send him a personal note of thanks from me. People who do the right thing when it's hard should be rewarded." Then, his voice softened almost imperceptibly as he turned back to David Chen. "Find the doctor who founded the world's leading consultancy on implicit bias and de-escalation training in the service industry. I don't care what they charge. Hire them. By the end of this year, every single employee at Aura Airlines, from the boardroom to the baggage claim, will have gone through the most rigorous sensitivity and anti-bias training program ever created." He paused, walking back to the head of the table. "I named this airline Aura because it was supposed to represent an atmosphere of excellence, of comfort, of safety. Today, that name was poisoned. Our new mission is not just to clean up this mess. It's to become the undisputed global standard for what it means to treat every single passenger with dignity and respect. Aaliyah is a healer. In her name, we will heal this company." He picked up his car keys. "I'm going to the clinic to be with my wife. You all have your orders. I expect results by the time I return." As he walked out, leaving 3 of the most powerful executives in the UK scrambling to execute his commands, one thing was clear. This was no longer a corporate crisis. It was a crusade, and Nathaniel Beaumont was a man who had never lost a war. The video hit the internet like a detonation. Shot from the clear, steady perspective of Cody Evans' phone, it was damning and unequivocal. There was no room for interpretation. It showed Brenda's sneering condescension, Aaliyah's calm but firm responses, and the horrific, jarring moment of the slap. The hashtag started trending within the hour. Chakra Aura Airlines assault, Chakra Justice for Der Williams, and the brutally simple, Nature Fire Brenda. Brenda Jenkins found herself at the center of a global firestorm. After being questioned and released pending charges by the airport police, she arrived at her modest semi-detached house in a suburb near Gatwick to find a swarm of news vans parked on her street. Her face, contorted in that moment of rage at 35,000 feet, was now plastered across every news site and social media feed. Her life unraveled with breathtaking speed. An official termination notice from Aura Airlines arrived by courier that afternoon, a brutally curt document that cited gross misconduct and referenced the video evidence. The flight attendants union, after reviewing the footage, released a statement condemning her actions and announcing they would not be representing her in any grievance process. Her colleagues, even those who had shared her cynical views, distanced themselves immediately. She was an outcast, a pariah. The legal consequences were even more severe. Fueled by a relentless push from Aura's own legal team, the Crown Prosecution Service charged her with assault occasioning actual bodily harm, a serious offense. Her name became synonymous with corporate malpractice and racial prejudice. She lost not only her job, but her pension, which was voided by a morality clause in her contract she had never bothered to read. In a matter of days, Brenda Jenkins went from a petty tyrant of the skies to a national disgrace, facing a criminal record and financial ruin. But Nate Beaumont's plan went far beyond the punishment of one woman. His crusade was systemic. The internal audit he had ordered unearthed a troubling pattern. Over the past decade, Brenda Jenkins had accumulated 12 formal passenger complaints, 9 of which were filed by people of color. They all told a similar story: dismissiveness, microaggressions, and a hostile attitude. Each complaint had been resolved by a supervisor with a simple note in her file: and a generic apology voucher sent to the passenger. The system hadn't just failed, it had actively protected and enabled her behavior. Nate fired the two supervisors who had repeatedly signed off on her performance reviews and the regional manager who oversaw them. The message was electric, sending shockwaves through the company's middle management. Complacency in the face of prejudice would be treated as complicity. Then came the positive reinforcement. Jessica, the junior flight attendant who had shown Aaliyah kindness, was called into a meeting with the vice president of in-flight services. She was terrified, expecting to be reprimanded for defying Brenda. Instead, she was given an immediate promotion to cabin purser, a significant raise, and asked to be a founding member of a new Passenger Advocacy and Service Excellence Task Force. She was publicly celebrated in a company-wide memo from Nate himself as an example of the Aura standard. The Dr. Aaliyah Williams Initiative was rolled out with incredible speed and resources. Nate hired the prestigious firm of Dr. Anika Sharma, a renowned sociologist specializing in implicit bias. The training was not a one-off webinar. It was an intensive, multi-day, in-person course that became mandatory for every single one of Aura's 15,000 employees. Pilots, gate agents, corporate executives, and every single flight attendant had to complete it. Failure to pass the course's final assessment meant suspension until they could. The training was grueling and uncomfortable. It forced employees to confront their own hidden biases through simulations, role-playing, and frank, difficult conversations about race, privilege, and power. It was revolutionary for the industry, and other airlines began watching with intense interest. Aaliyah, recovering at home with Nate, was initially hesitant to have her name attached to the initiative. She didn't want to be defined by her trauma, but Nate convinced her otherwise. "This isn't about what she did to you, my love," he said softly one evening, his hand resting on her belly. "It's about making sure it never happens to anyone else. Your name on this won't stand for victimhood. It will stand for strength, for change, for healing. It's who you are." She agreed. She even participated in the design of the training modules, providing her perspective as both a frequent flyer and a Black woman. Her calm, intelligent input shaped the program into something authentic and powerful. The karma that hit Brenda was hard and personal, but the karma Nate Beaumont unleashed was corporate, systemic, and transformative. He wasn't just firing a bad employee. He was rebuilding his company's entire ethical framework from the ground up. He was turning the ugliest moment in his airline's history into its most defining and ultimately its proudest. The world was watching, and Aura Airlines, under the furious, focused gaze of its owner, was about to be reborn. 4 months later, the name Brenda Jenkins had faded from the headlines, becoming a cautionary footnote in the annals of internet infamy. The storm she had created, however, had not dissipated. Instead, under the focused will of Nathaniel Beaumont, it had been harnessed, transforming into a cleansing wind that swept through every corner of Aura Airlines. The change was most palpable in the pre-flight briefing rooms, sterile spaces that had once been hubs of cynical gossip and complaint sharing. In a room overlooking the tarmac at JFK, Jessica, her new purser stripes gleaming on her uniform shoulders, addressed her crew for Flight 212 to Rome. Her voice was warm but firm, imbued with a confidence she hadn't possessed just a few months prior. "Okay, everyone, listen up," she began, her eyes scanning the faces of the flight attendants before her, a mix of seasoned veterans and new hires. "We have a full flight, with several passengers requiring special assistance and 3 children under 2 in the main cabin. But first, let's talk about our standard. The Aura standard. It's not about just serving drinks and meals. It's about creating an atmosphere of safety and respect from the moment a passenger steps on board. Remember the core principles of the Williams Initiative. Perceive, acknowledge, care. Perceive the individual, not the stereotype. Acknowledge their needs, spoken and unspoken, and care enough to act with empathy." An older flight attendant, a man who had flown for 30 years, nodded grimly. "I've done a dozen of these corporate trainings. This one was different. It actually stuck." "It has to stick," Jessica said, her gaze unwavering. "Because what happened on Flight 710 wasn't just a failure of one person. It was a failure of perception, of acknowledgement, of care. It was a failure of our culture. Management has given us the tools. It's on us to use them on every single flight. We are the guardians of this space. Let's make it worthy of our passengers' trust. The crew responded with a chorus of determined ayes, a sound of a team united by a new, more profound mission. For Brenda Jenkins, there was no mission. Her life had been reduced to a series of humiliations. The court appearance was a blur of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Pleading guilty, she had stood before the judge as a prosecutor detailed her disgraceful abuse of authority. The video was played for the court, and she had to watch herself, her face a grotesque mask of rage, as a collective gasp went through the gallery. The sentence, 200 hours of community service, a steep fine that wiped out her savings, and court-mandated therapy, was almost a relief compared to the public shaming. Her community service involved cleaning a litter-strewn public park in South London. One bleak Tuesday morning, as she speared a discarded crisp packet with her litter picker, a car slowed on the adjacent road. A young man leaned out the passenger window, his phone up, recording. "Hey, it's the racist flight attendant," he yelled, laughing. "Smile for TikTok." Brenda flinched as if she'd been slapped herself. She turned away, her face burning. Her world shrunk to the muddy grass and the taunts of strangers. In her therapy sessions, she spoke of feeling wronged, of the stress of her job, of how the passenger had provoked her. Her therapist listened patiently before quietly pointing out that Brenda had yet to take full, unreserved responsibility for her own actions. The bitterness that had poisoned her interactions at 35,000 feet had followed her down to the ground, a toxic residue she couldn't seem to scrub away. Meanwhile, in a tranquil, sun-drenched nursery in their London home, Aaliyah Williams experienced a different kind of transformation. Motherhood had enveloped her. The scent of baby powder had replaced the sterile smell of aircraft cabins. The soft gurgles of her daughter, Hope, the only sound that mattered. The trauma of the flight had not vanished, but it had receded, becoming a scar rather than an open wound. Nate was a revelation as a father. The titan of industry, who could make markets tremble with a single phone call, would spend hours just holding his daughter, whispering nonsense to make her smile. He saw the lingering shadows in Aaliyah's eyes and knew that part of her healing was still incomplete. One evening, as Hope slept soundly in her bassinet, Nate sat beside Aaliyah on the sofa. "I want to show you something," he said gently, holding out a tablet. She hesitated. "Nate, I don't want to see news articles. I don't want to see my name." "It's not that," he assured her. "It's the opposite. This is what you've built." He opened a file. It was a collection of emails and social media posts forwarded to him by Aura's customer relations department. There were hundreds of them. He read one aloud from a Muslim family who praised a gate agent for arranging for them to have a quiet space to pray before boarding. He read another from an elderly man who was touched when a flight attendant noticed he was struggling and personally escorted him through a tight connection. And then he showed her the letter from the young black woman who had flown from Atlanta to Paris. Aaliyah read the words, "Because of you, a flight is no longer something I have to endure. It's something I can enjoy." And a profound cathartic sob escaped her. Nate held her, letting her cry. "That is the karma, Aaliyah," he murmured into her hair. "Not Brenda Jenkins picking up trash in a park. This, hundreds of moments of kindness and dignity, happening every day all over the world because of what you went through, because of your strength." The final piece of her healing arrived a week later in an unexpected email. It was from Cody Evans. He had been on another Aura flight using the lifetime pass Nate had gifted him. "Dr. Williams," the email began, "we've never formally met, but I was on flight 710. I wanted you to know I just flew Aura from San Francisco to Tokyo. I watched my flight crew. I saw them handle a passenger who was clearly having a bad day with a level of patience and grace I've never seen before. I saw them treat an elderly woman traveling alone like she was their own grandmother. I saw the legacy of what you did. What you and your husband built from that ugly moment is real, it's tangible, and it matters. Thank you." Aaliyah read the email twice, then looked from the screen to her husband, and then to the bassinet where their daughter was stirring, her tiny hands reaching for a world that was, in one small but meaningful corner, a little safer and a little kinder. The slap had been an act of division and hate, meant to make her feel small and powerless. But in its aftermath, she had discovered her true power, not just to endure, but to inspire a fundamental change. The view from the ground, surrounded by her family and the evidence of a legacy of healing, was infinitely more beautiful than any view from the sky had ever been. And so, the story of Flight 710 comes to a close. It's a stark reminder that the person you mistreat in a moment of arrogance could hold the keys to the very world you live in. But it's also a story about more than just karma. It's about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been simply firing Brenda Jenkins. Justice was rebuilding the entire system that allowed her to fester. Nathaniel Beaumont used his power not just to punish, but to heal, transforming his wife's pain into a powerful force for positive, lasting change. This story teaches us that true strength isn't just about striking back. It's about building something better in the place where the damage was done. What did you think of Brenda's fate? Was it justified? What part of Nate's response impressed you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that accountability and positive change are the ultimate forms of justice, then hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next story.